Brnovich is the Attorney General of the great state of Arizona. I was just there. I was in Tucson. Was it last week, I guess. Mark, how are you, sir?
Very good, great one. Thank you for having me on, Mark.
It is my pleasure. You've done something very, very important respecting state sovereignty and immigration, Mark. I want you to explain that to the nation.
Basically, we have just issued a formal legal opinion, and basically the first of its kind, that says that President Biden, the federal government, is failing to uphold its obligations under the U.S. Constitution. And as you know, Mark, specifically Article 4, Section 4, says that the federal government has to protect us against invasion. And the federal government is supposed to be dealing with national security, border security, and they have failed. And as a result of that failure, I believe our governor and any other governor can indeed say that there is an invasion going on, and that, I think, will allow the states to have more authority in enforcing our criminal laws to help stem the tide of illegal drugs and all the gang and cartel activity that's happening along our southern border, and as you know, is affecting so many other states because of the dramatic increase in fentanyl and methamphetamine coming into our country.
So this is very, very important. You've drawn the conclusion that the state is effectively under attack from an immigration perspective, that it's affecting the health and safety of the citizens of Arizona. You have an obligation as the Attorney General of Arizona to protect the citizens of Arizona. And if the federal government's going to fail to do it, then the state has an obligation to step in and itself do it. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You know, Mark, we have numerous lawsuits against the Biden administration related to not only immigration, but trying to enforce our constitutional rights and limit the power of federal government. And the irony is that the Biden administration has failed on so many levels, and the one thing they should be doing, and they can do, is to secure our border, and they're not. So we have seen this, the on-ground violence escalate, the lawlessness escalate, the dramatic increase in drugs coming into our country. It's estimated that the cartels are making $14 million a day. So the Biden administration is enriching and empowering the cartels, and as a result of that, it does legally, we believe, constitute an invasion pursuant to our U.S. Constitution, and that means that the states need to do the job the federal government refuses to do. And so this is an exercise of state sovereignty. This is one of those powers retained by the states when they created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states created the federal government. And so as a result of that lawlessness and this increase of the cartel and gang violence at our border, we believe that it does constitute an invasion.
It's a very important point. Constitutional point you make, and you also make the point in your order here that, look, there's a dual protection under the state constitution, under the federal constitution. We have an obligation to protect the citizens of Arizona. You can't just sit on your hands and whine about this stuff. And what you're saying is that the instrumentalities of the state can step up now and do whatever needs to be done in lieu of the federal government's action. Let me ask you another point. I'm talking to Mark Bnrobvich, the Attorney General of Arizona, is running for the Senate, the Republican primary, whom I've endorsed. Mark, let me ask you this. A president of the United States, whether he supports a federal law or not, and there's been Supreme Court rulings on this too, but it's so obvious, has an obligation to enforce them. Now, if a president of the United States is intentionally not enforcing federal laws respecting immigration, and he's not, and the damage from that, the economic damage, the damage, these cartels are getting footholds in states like Arizona. They're becoming stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
And this is a primary responsibility. I just want to ask you, is that not at least something that the House should look at as a possible impeachable offense and conduct an investigation?
Absolutely. And in fact, I've already called for Secretary Mayorkas to be impeached because he is failing miserably at his job. And I think of all your listeners know that he is the worst of all the appointees of the Biden administration. And that says a lot because there's a lot of bad ones. And so I think at the end of the day, Mayorkas needs to be impeached. I've already called for him to be replaced. He won't. So Congress needs to do its job. He needs to be impeached. And clearly, the president is supposed to, take charge and make sure that the laws are being enforced, and he's not. And whether that's our lawsuit where he is failing, his interim guidance, where he's violating Title 8 of the U.S. Code, where he's not deporting people with deportation orders, whether it's failing to build the wall, you can go through a whole plethora of lists. But at the end of the day, just common sense, hardworking American taxpayers understand that there is a record amount of drugs coming in. I've seen as a prosecutor the price of
let me take a break. I want you to continue. We'd like to hold you over. We're talking to the Attorney General Mark Bnrobvich of Arizona, who's really pounding away. Mark Bnrobvich, the Attorney General of Arizona, seeking the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate. I just want to circle back to your memo here. I'll call an order, if you will. And it points out, and you quote Scalia in here, that a state has a right to defend its territory against an enemy or an invasion. And you're saying that's exactly right. And we waited to see if Biden will do anything because, you have to create a record. You have to have the facts at hand. And you're saying, well, that's what's happening. We've got cartels. We've got everything going on here, fentanyl flowing in here. You've brought lawsuit after lawsuit. You're keeping the Department of Justice bogged down, which is a good thing. But the reason I'm bringing this up, Mark, is this. Others can learn from this. You're going on offense. You're not sitting around wringing your hands, just going on TV and radio. You're trying to find ways that are obvious, ways that are not so obvious, to take on this administration and take on their policies in court. And it's wave after wave of litigation you're bringing. Do I have that about right?
Oh, thank you, Mark, for the kind words. And yes, and in fact, just today, me and four of my colleagues sued the Biden administration over his executive order that tries to set a minimum wage, even though that was rejected by the U.S. Senate earlier in the year. So once again, he's using his pen and his phone, apparently, to try to unilaterally write U.S. law. So we keep having to sue him, going on the offense, as you said. And in fact, on February 23rd, I will be at the U.S. Supreme Court arguing against Biden's DOJ lawyers in the public charge rule, where the Biden administration unilaterally withdrew a rule that's the common sense rule the Trump administration adopted based on U.S. statutes that says if you want to come to the United States, we are the land of the free, we're land of immigrants, but we are not the land of the welfare state. So you have to be able to support yourself. And the Biden administration is trying to incentivize after decriminalizing people coming here. So we're going to be at the U.S. Supreme Court fighting his DOJ on that one just in a couple weeks.
Let me ask you a question that's more about not the law, but about policy. Why would a administration want to encourage people to come to the United States who cannot support themselves but will immediately go on our welfare system? It used to be past immigrants had to demonstrate that they could, pay for themselves, or they had people who would help them and so forth, that they wouldn't be wards of the state. This is the opposite. First of all, have you ever seen anything like this before? And secondly, what is the purpose?
No, I haven't seen anything like this before. And just so you know, Mark, for me, this issue is personal. I am a first-generation American. My parents lived through World War II. They lived through communism. And when your family has not just studied history, but lived it, you have this unique appreciation for how fragile and important liberty is, freedom. As Ronald Reagan used to remind us, freedom is not something we pass on to our kids in the bloodstream. It's got to be fought for. And that's why I'm doing my role as Attorney General, why I'm running for the Senate. And I think I know you know the answer, and I'm sure most of your listeners know the answers. What the Biden administration is doing, and the progressive left, and the people talking in Uncle Joe's ear, is they are trying to essentially centralize all power in Washington, D.C., socialize our economy, and make people to be dependent on central authority. Because the far left, the progressives, think they know what's best, and they have no appreciation for understanding of liberty and freedom, and this is the road to tyranny. This is the road to serfdom, and that's exactly what the left is doing. And so I think by trying to encourage people to come here and break the law, undermine the rule of law, and then try to give them benefits, we essentially now are having people come into the United States for the wrong reasons. We are a land of immigrants, a nation of immigrants, but at the end of the day, we are most importantly a nation of laws, and the Constitution has to mean something. Every tin-horn dictator, Mark, had a Constitution. They had one in the Soviet Union that guaranteed all sorts of stuff. didn't mean anything. Words on paper. Venezuela had all sorts of laws. It was a constitutional republic. It had, one of the most prosperous economies. And then a communist dictator, Hugo Chavez, came in and systematically started arbitrarily confiscating property, destroyed the independent judiciary, and it's now an economic basket case where people live in tyranny and fear. And my concern, my worry is, if you know history, and you know this is all about your book, what is happening right now is this is all neo-Marxism. This is all about the far left, the intellectuals that want to control our lives and centralize power, everything from the economy to elections in Washington, D.C. And that's why we got to fight. That's why I'm fighting, brother.
And this is why I think you'd be outstanding in Washington. And what you're doing now is very, very important in terms of leading the way in this litigation. And I'm glad you're going to be making the argument at the Supreme Court in February, later this month, because I think you'll be very, very effective. The name is Mark Bnrobvich. Mark, if people want to get in touch with you and help you, whether in Arizona or elsewhere, nice and slowly, what do they do? Brno4az.com is the website. BRNOFORAZ.com. People can find out more about me, my background, why I'm running, and why I'm the guy to take out Mark Kelly here in Arizona. By the way, what does Mark Kelly do? I mean, other than the lap boy for Schumer, seriously, I never hear from this guy. Do you hear from him back in Arizona? No, I was just down at the border. All the folks down there, both Republican and Democrats, are very frustrated. And I think that's because he spent more time in space than he does in Arizona. So he just doesn't get our state. He doesn't get the importance of the Second Amendment, our Western heritage of strong individualism and not trusting the federal government. He just doesn't get that. He cares more about Chuck Schumer than he does about Arizona taxpayers. I think that's quite right. All right, Mark, take care of yourself. Be safe, my friend.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, God bless.